Welcome to Flight Path, the weekly podcast for the Tern community, where we share what's new, what's next, and what's coming to the platform you're helping us build. Kicking off season 2, we're focusing on group travel, a big theme this quarter. But that's just one part of our journey. We're also rolling out features for agencies, tackling your most requested updates, and yes, shipping product updates every single week. So join Tern's R&D leadership team, Molly, our head of product, David, Tern CEO and co-founder, and Brad, head of design, as well as an occasional special guest, as we bring you into the loop on everything happening at Tern. We're proud to be the only travel technology platform committed to weekly releases, and we couldn't do it without this incredible, engaged community. This podcast is for you, to keep you informed, inspired, and a part of the process. So if you're ready to stay connected with the latest from Tern, hit subscribe and join us every Friday on Flight Path. Let's keep building Tern together. Welcome back, everybody, to the Flight Path podcast. We are so excited to be back after our first week-long break since we started the podcast. So I was just telling Molly and Brad, it feels like it has been ages since we've done this. But if you're just tuning in for the first time, my name's David, CEO of Tern, joined by Brad, head of design, and Molly, head of product. And we have a super special guest that we're going to get to in just a second here. Before I do that, though, Brad always makes me say, if you're listening to this, you got to like the whatever you're listening to, Spotify, YouTube, whatever, make sure you push like, and then also subscribe. It's really fun to see the subscriber numbers continue to climb each week. We love to know that people actually listen to this. So appreciate you if you are a regular, and we're going to jump into a pretty exciting program today. We are joined by the newest Tern member, Jade Path, who just joined on Monday. But we have known each other for a long time, probably almost 10 years. And there's like a pretty funny story about the first time that Jade and I met that we may or may not share on the podcast. But Jade is joining to help lead special projects, operations. She's going to be helping on the product side. You can think of her as we throw the hardest projects that nobody owns at Jade, and hopefully she figures it out. So Jade, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Tern. Tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Jade. I've worked with these three. I did work with these three for many years at Handshake back in the day. I actually lived, David, we lived together. Brad, we didn't live together, right? As a part of Handshake?
No, I avoided that part of our history. I jumped in right after we graduated from being in the same house.
Yeah. So many years at Handshake, working closely to build out the university recruiting product, which was really fun. I wore a lot of hats there as well: customer success, support, really just solving hard problems there. So excited to bring that here. I then went on and joined an education startup that helped students learn math, which was really fun and a really close project to my heart. I studied math in school, thought I'd be a math teacher. So that was a really exciting way to continue that. That startup was acquired by Google. So I spent the last year and a half actually working at Google, building out learning and education products there and really learning how a company of that size operates. So I'm excited to get back into a small startup with a team that I've worked with closely before and bring those learnings to Tern.
And we're super excited to have you here. I know Brad and Molly both have some fun stories that we're going to add here. I think I need to say two things. One, it was also cool, like when Jade was at Google, she was like going to Croatia. So we're like bonding over all the kind of travel to Croatia and that type of thing. And two, I should clarify, like when Handshake was getting started, there was like 14 of us that all lived and worked and like built this whole team out of this like house in Palo Alto. And so if you've ever seen Silicon Valley on HBO, like it was literally that. And Jade was such a saint. She like moved in. I think you were the only woman at the time, like just like living in this house, and it was like a crazy time. So if you want some wild stories of what it's like to be early stages of building a startup that's not remote and that's all working out of a house, let us know. But Brad, Molly, how do you want to welcome Jade? Like, what can we talk about here?
Molly's face looked like she really had something exciting to say. Go for it, Molly.
Okay, well now it's just too hyped up. Jade is, I just can't believe how lucky we are to have Jade. We worked together so closely. We were like the only two PMs at Handshake for a while. So we were like in the trenches together. And when I first joined Tern, I was testing automations and workflows. And the first task I ever created was hire Jade. She has been like on my must hire list ever since we left Handshake. And so I'm so excited. And the timing couldn't be better. So for those of you who don't know, I'm like about 4 weeks away from my due date. I'm pregnant with baby number 2. And so Jade's an incredible product leader. You'll start to see her do things like the product updates and chime in the Facebook group. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to come back as soon as I'm able to. But you could not be in better hands with her. So I couldn't be more excited to have her joining us.
Thanks, Molly. It's been my dream since I left to work with Molly again. So I will do my best to step in for her while she's away, but excited for her to come back and work together again.
And when she signed her offer letter, I did mark the task complete. So, full circle moment there.
This is great. The story I was going to share was going to ask Jade if she knew that you had that on your to-do list since the very beginning. We've all been so excited to have you, Jade. I can't wait to really dig in more.
It's definitely the coolest thing about like this business, right? Just being able to hire a lot of like the best people we've ever worked with, and Jade is definitely at the top of that list. So Jade, super excited to have you here. For those of you that are listening, you'll see Jade start to come to the podcast more and more. This is the podcast debut, but you'll see her kind of filling in for Molly on maternity leave. And Jade, thanks for joining. I think we're going to get back to the agenda here, but we'll see you on a future episode.
Great. See you all soon.
Bye. Oh, that is so exciting. What a fun kind of milestone. And I remember, Molly, like you had that task and I was like, I better text Jade. And, fast forward, a year and here we are. So it's a pretty cool milestone, pretty cool moment.
It was like 8 months overdue when I marked it complete, but it was marked complete, I guess.
It got done. Yeah.
It got done.
I also just loved like that like little glimpse into like the testing world and how that works. So it's been a couple weeks since we caught up here on the Flight Path podcast. So let's do a little kind of 2-week holiday weekend review, starting with Molly. What's been going on?
Oh man, I was hoping you'd throw to Brad first because
okay.
I feel
Brad,
you
can go first.
Yeah, Brad, you tell us.
Sure. I think what I said I was going to do, we were like, what are you doing for the holidays? And I was like, I'm going to run a half marathon really fast. And I did it. So I'm going to brag on myself.
Yay! That's right. We said we're going to check in.
So that's really the highlight of my Thanksgiving.
What was your time?
The time, I don't remember the exact time, but I beat the 90 minutes that I was hoping for. I think it was like 1:29:30 something. So it was just under 90 minutes for half. So that was a real highlight. Other than that, it's pretty chill. Just kind of like hung out with Jack and his parents and his sister, and then jumped right back into work this week and have been deep on groups and room selection, which we'll talk about. But yeah, it's been a bit of like whiplash from like the chillest 4 days for like Thursday to Sunday, and then like all the way back into to building things here at Tern. But it's been good.
Yeah, definitely whiplash, right? Like, oh, like nice relaxing recharge. And by the way, we have a webinar in 8 days or whatever it is, right? Like
exactly.
Molly, you ready now?
I am. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so when we last met, I said that I was going to go to this screening of Wicked in a rented out private theater. And then when I got off the podcast, I asked my husband, Zach, I was like, wait a second, was that a lie? Like, is that what's happening? Because like I had heard that was what was happening, but I realized that I didn't know. Turns out it wasn't quite a whole theater, but it was a private screening room within a movie theater complex. So there was like 20 of us. It was really fun. It was a great movie. And so that was a really good time. And then, like Brad said, kind of came right back into it. We're not only sprinting to get certain things out before the webinar, but we are also, we have a lot to do to like prepare to hit the ground running post holiday. So we're trying to plan all these things and test all these things and make sure we can get out what we need in the next 2 weeks. So there's a lot going on, and we're going to talk about all of it in a little bit.
We sure are. Love that. I had a fantastic time. I think I shared, I was in Hawaii for the week of Thanksgiving, which was lovely. Did 4 days on the Big Island and then 5 days, I think it was on Maui, which we had not been to. And it was really nice. It was at some points relaxing, but it was also, it's like one of those trips where you're like trying to do a lot of things, all of which were fun. But like between moving and having a whole day of travel, like it wasn't quite the like totally restorative, but it was really fun. We like went up to the top of Mount Hakiakala, or the Hakiakala. I don't know if I'm saying that. I'm probably not saying it right, but like Haleakala. I can say it in my head, but when I try and like make the words with it doesn't happen. And like, you know, got some snorkeling in. We did like a boat ride. It was like really, really nice. But then I did a red eye back to start the week, and it was like that's always tough. So, but it was really nice. And yeah, now it's full steam ahead. We have a crazy December planned. We've got the webinar next week, which I can't believe we haven't really talked about much since right at this point in the podcast. But if you haven't already registered, this is going to be one of the best webinars. And I know I say that every time, but every time they get better. That we've had. And we're going to be like walking through the whole end-to-end flow of groups. We're going to be recapping everything that we've shipped. We're going to give you a little bit of a preview of 2025. Like there's, you know, going to be worth attending. So we have that, which is like all hands on deck getting ready for. Then literally 3 days after that, we go into our whole team offsite. So this has kind of become a tradition where we bring the whole team together in kind of mid-late December. For a lot of us, it's the only time that we like see each other in person. There's a lot of people on the team that we haven't actually even met in person. Like we do all this on Zoom. So that's going to be really special. We're bringing everyone to Detroit so that Molly can attend without having to worry about travel. Well, you can't really travel, I guess, at this point. So very much looking forward to that. But there's a lot of prep to do to get ready for that. So it's going to be a busy couple days.
People aren't necessarily pleased with the location. So I appreciate you blaming me for it, David.
Yeah, of course. I'm like, no, like last year we did Mexico, but this year we're going to Detroit in December. Yeah. But like no reason for it.
I heard it was just so we could watch the Lions game at your house, David. I thought that was
exactly. I'm going to be hosting a little Lions game watching party, and that will be, I think, very fun. And it's also, I think, like Detroit gets a bad rap. Like there's going to be like great restaurants. We got some really cool experiences. We got some amazing guest speakers coming in. Like it's going to be really special. So I'm
also so excited to see how tall everyone is. This is always my thing whenever I meet people, and like on Zoom, and you never know. I'm like, I can't I can't see you completely, and then you were like surprised by people like 6 foot tall. You're like, where did you come from?
The last night when I met Matthias, I was like, whoa, like you are way taller than I was expecting. Like, so yes, that'll be fun.
Well, and fun fact. Maybe actually this is an unfun fact, but I was at Tern for the Mexico offsite, but my daughter had decided she would no longer bottle feed, so I actually couldn't go. And so I haven't seen the height of so many people.
That's so true. All right. Well, enough fun stuff. Let's get into the deep dives. Starting with a quick update. We talked last time about these, like the group kind of sign up forms coming soon. That's now been shipped. Molly, you want to kind of just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I object to you calling it not fun, but I will for sure. So,
fair. It is very fun. Different kind of fun.
Part of the podcast, right? So yeah, we had talked about this is coming soon because we weren't going to do the podcast the week of Thanksgiving. So we did release sign up forms for group trips right before the break. It's been really exciting to see how people are using it. We got some really fun feedback that someone's already gotten, I think, 11 signups via their landing page for a cruise and the sign up. So that's been really fun to see. Basically what this does is you have these beautiful landing pages that we've talked about a lot before, but instead of setting up a call to action that's like, call me or email me, the call to action can actually be, sign up for this trip. And when the client goes through and does that, they'll fill out kind of a standard equivalent of a trip request form. There's some differences that we went over last time. And it actually creates the sub-trip using the group itinerary. So it saves you a lot of time as the advisor, and you can get back to the client right away with next steps. So that's been a really exciting one. People are very excited about it. I think the main piece of feedback that we've gotten that isn't new, we've heard this from about just like regular forms in general, is wanting more control over some of those required questions. So things like being able to require email, I've heard password, like passport. So some of these other things that become especially important for groups, we've already heard this feedback when it comes to forms. So Brad and I were scheming yesterday to see if there's something faster that we could slot in as a quick win here. No promises. We know this is really important to you, so we're hoping to make some improvements around giving you more control in those required fields.
Love that. I know lots of chatter about that within the group's context. Obviously, also some, a lot of, you're seeing kind of comments even in the Facebook group about just forms generally. So I think that'll be, hopefully a good foundation for us to think, broadly around like, how do we continue to add more optionality? That's something I shared in the Facebook group too, more specific to like individual forms. But one of the reasons we decided to kind of have this like default set of required fields for some of the elements was just like every time you add a configuration, it adds complexity, right? And like, especially when we're trying to move quickly and learn, like we try and minimize the complexity to the extent that we can. And that's kind of why we made the initial set of decisions. But as the feedback continues to come in, as we understand the use cases, like, I think adding some of that optionality and maybe even changing some of the defaults is going to make sense. So stay tuned on that front. Molly, looks like you want to add something.
Yeah, just on that note, like I think another just point of context that's helpful for folks is other systems that you might be used to are a little different, where these forms automatically create trips. They automatically create contacts and travelers on those trips. So we also need things like structured in a very certain way that makes it a little harder. So it is not like a very quick, we've heard it. If it was super quick, we would have done it like that. It's not, but we are trying to figure out how we thread the needle and make some changes here soon.
Yeah, that like the flow is so important and like I think so key to Tern. The ability to like you fill out a trip request form, it creates a trip. You fill out a contact form, automatically updates or creates a contact, right? Like that is actually not trivial at all to do, right? And to make that reliable and to like figure out deduplication and like you start to add, well, some forms will have this field and some forms won't have this field. And like, how do you manage that configuration? And yeah, it's doable, but it's just lift, right? It's complexity. So,
yeah.
All right. So forms are live. People are using them. It's working. It's super cool to see. We're going to, again, be going in the webinar through this like full end-to-end flow. So you'll definitely want to be there to kind of see how that all comes to life. Let's talk about the next really big project that is, it's like pretty exciting. It's like fundamentally rethinking how kind of lodging works in Tern and like acknowledging feedback that we've gotten, I think, since the board view was created. Like our first users were like, how do I solve this problem of rooms? And we've come up with a pretty cool way to do it. So Molly, you want to kick off what the problem was and then we'll hand it over to what the feature is, and then Brad can kind of talk through what it looks like and how it works.
Absolutely. So if you are familiar with Tern already, option blocks are this really powerful way to be able to have clients make decisions on an itinerary. So do they want to stay at one hotel or the other, or do, select across various activities? But where this breaks down is if you're trying to get them to select rooms, because in order to actually get them to select rooms, you would have to either choose to set up 3 different lodging activities, all for the same hotel, all with a different room, and put those in an option block, or just coordinate kind of offline or via email with them on what rooms they want. And so this was already a really big pain point for regular trips. We hear about this all the time. We saw it happening. It was really painful. There's also limitations around what if they want 2 of the same room, then you'd have to do like the lodging again for the same room. So, and you can't even actually pick multiple options. So there was a lot wrong with this. I'll kind of leave it there. And then when we looked at what we felt was a really important end-to-end vision for groups, we started to think, oh, wow, this is really going to break, because if you go through a sign-up flow and you need to like authorize a payment in order to sign up, suddenly, if you can't select multiple of these rooms if you need them, if it becomes 2 different lodging activities, which is not how you're going to pay for the hotel, it all just really breaks and falls apart. So we thought, okay, we're going to have to solve this. While we're here, let's solve it everywhere. We're not going to just solve it for groups. We're going to solve it for all trips. So that's going to be really exciting for people. I think I'm not sure people are expecting this. I think it's going to be a really fun surprise. And basically it in a way brings the option block concept, but into the groups tab, or into the rooms tab of a lodging item. it's a lot slicker in my opinion. So basically you can set up, instead of room selections, you can set up room options, and then your client will be able to see those on the itinerary. And then coming soon as a part of the sign up flow, make the selections, choose 5 of the same room type if they want to, and then immediately authorize things if you've set them up to be ready for authorization as well. So a lot more that is involved here. And the last thing, I just want to make sure not to forget to say this. Normally we talk about features that we've just shipped this week. This is almost ready. I think it should be live either later this afternoon or Monday morning, depending on how some things shake out. So coming very soon, but depending on when you tune into this, it might not be quite ready yet.
And Brad's going to kind of talk through a little bit more of like what it is, but I just want to emphasize the pain that Molly talked about there, because this would come in, like we'd be on support or we'd be doing demos or we'd be doing like, and people would like be all bought in on this vision that we have, which is like when you put a proposal in front of a client, like for your client, it should feel like an online checkout experience, right? And it should just feel so easy for them to like make the decisions that they need to, and then like put a credit card in and just be done with it. But like Molly said, if you had 2 different hotels and each hotel had 3 rooms, like the whole thing breaks, right? Like, and we had to be like, well, like they could select one of the option blocks and then like let you know, and then you could go in and delete that option block and add 3 more option blocks for rooms. And it's just like, what is going on here? But architecture, I just want to undermine, like option blocks don't work, right? Like we have to create this like whole net new decision-making concept in order to actually like solve this, right? So that's why it hasn't been solved yet. But like, wow, this is going to be cool. So Brad, do you want to talk about how we thought about kind of implementing it?
Yeah. And I think to that point, like you were saying, like a new decision-making concept kind of within this. And that is really how we've thought about this. It's not just like, oh, let's build a new room selection thing. It's like, as we think about kind of like an integrated, almost like booking experience for groups, like when you sign up for a group, you can like pick any selections you might need to make when you're making that initial sign up decision. That includes room selection, but also includes things like picking optional add-ons, maybe in the future, deciding which dates, if you're thinking about like a destination wedding, if you have some flexibility and like when you arrive or when you check out, like thinking about this in that way, that's like, okay, we have a system so that you could, like provide your client some flexibility so they can help kind of create that trip with you and provide their preferences, but then also to make sure it fits into the world of Tern and like just lands right in their itinerary. So it's not just like, oh, here's another form and you have to go manually like kind of take their answers and like go update everything on their trip. So we're thinking about it that way. That's how we've done a lot of the design, and we're starting with like that first piece, which is just room selection. And yeah, it sounds so simple. That's just like, oh yeah, clients can pick rooms. If I almost should like demo my Figma file where you see all of the designs. So there's like maybe like 3 core buckets of things we had to think through here. What is the configuration? Like, how do advisors set this up? We tried to keep that as close as possible to how you manage rooms today. So like not a whole lot of new stuff for you to learn, but there's a button to toggle between like options mode and selections mode. And hopefully that's intuitive for most folks. There's like the client selection piece. Like how do they actually go about picking rooms? They see all the options. They can like click in to see the details, make sure they're informed about their choices, pricing, things like that. And then they can go through that almost like checkout flow. If they pick a room and then they need to authorize payment for that room, they're pushed right into that flow so that you don't have to reach back out to them and be like, cool, I know you want room A. Can you give me credit card off so I can actually pay for room A now? So again, we've got kind of the advisor setup, the client actual flow, and then we've got this incredibly long list of everywhere that we show pricing for a lodging item, which again, it sounds really simple, but if you think about before, it was like, okay, this hotel will cost $2,000 or something. Like this item in your itinerary is $2,000, and now we're like, actually, it starts at $2,000, but if you pick the more expensive room, there's actually a higher price, and that means on the itinerary, on the like in the web app and the web version, on the itinerary, on the pricing tab, when you click into the activity on the pricing tab, when you look at the total for the trip, now we have to count for, there's like a range. If you look at the total on the pricing tab, and then do the same thing on the mobile app and on the PDF. So like the list just like expands I don't know, like there's some math. We wish Jade was here to still talk about math, the combinatorics, right? Like it's like exponentially grows when you think about adding like one more. It's like, oh, well, this thing now has two options. It's like, well, multiply that by everything we have in the product already today. So yeah, it's quite complex. I think hopefully it feels incredibly simple for you when you actually go to use it, and it doesn't feel like we had to like dig through all of these parts of the code to to like make sure it flows through the whole thing. But yeah, it's been a really fun project to work on, and also one of those projects where you're just like banging your head against the wall, like, oh no, there's another place. We like Molly and I were testing this morning. You're like, oh, that one, oh, that other one. And so yeah, it's been a good project.
Well, and I think this is like another just really good example of what makes Tern unique, especially I think in the travel industry, right? Because there's like probably an easier pathway here, right? Like Brad, you alluded to this, which is just like build a form, right? And like the advisor, like, or the traveler submits that form, and the form just like emails the advisor, and then the advisor has to come in and like do a bunch of manual work, and it's like annoying and prone to error. And then the client's like waiting, and there's this kind of constant back and forth, which just feels inefficient and antiquated. And like, but that's how it's been sort of like solved by other systems, right? And so like we could have just said like, cool, like we'll add a form to the lodging element and like let the advisor do all the manual work. But like that's so contrary to this vision that we have of like empowering advisors to be more efficient, to create a more modern kind of checkout experience for their clients. And so we're like doing the hard thing. And like it is hard, like Brad said, like hundreds of parts of the product, like the math that goes into this and being able to account for all these different options, like is tremendously complex. But, and I love the way you said this, Brad, like if you get that right, it starts to feel like magic to the traveler, right? In particular. And this is only possible because we did the hard thing on credit card authorization to actually bring this like online checkout style experience that feels really good for your travelers. And we combine that with, you know, expertise in how to make this compliant and help, you know, prevent chargebacks to the extent possible. Like, and so I've said this a lot. People are like, why don't you do groups? Like, why don't you do groups? Like literally I was looking through this and head to the webinar. It's like people have been emailing us about groups since like May of 2023, right? Before we even had forms, right? They're like groups. And the response was always like, yes, we understand how critical groups are, but groups is a culmination of all these other building blocks that have to work together. And I think what I'm most excited for the webinar on Wednesday is that people will see that for the first time. And they'll see how all these different components come together to create something that is really, really special. And it was the output of doing the hard thing on credit card authorization. It was doing the hard thing on forms to like auto-create this. And yes, we have work to do on forms still, but like from a kind of first principles, like the automation of creating of content and structures is like totally different than anything else out there. Like that list just goes on and on and on. Pricing and packaging and like all these different pieces, we did the kind of hard thing because we knew that in the end, we could string this all together and start to create this like really unique end-to-end flow that's only possible once you've done all those other hard things, right? And this is, you know, what I think is going to be really, really special to see. And obviously we have a lot more planned even into kind of the new year in terms of like building out even more of that sophistication. But it's like, I don't know, this is why I'm so bullish on Tern continuing to be so far ahead in terms of innovation and leading, because like we just have a team like Brad and Molly and the engineering team who like not only can think about and understand the hard things, but they can build it, right? And build it in a couple weeks is what we've been doing all this hard stuff in. Like it's just mind-bogglingly cool. So maybe that's a good segue into Group's roadmap. So we're going to be releasing a big kind of end-to-end flow and kind of really talking through that in the webinar. But we also know in classic Tern style that we're not done, right? It's not like we're going to ship it on Wednesday and be like, oh, Groups is done. We're calling it a year. So Molly, do you want to talk about like what we've got planned for kind of Q1 of next year Groups wise?
Yeah. And our work this year isn't done yet either. So yeah, ahead of the webinar, we have to officially ship room selections, but that's looking good. And then we have to enable like the true vision, right? Like the full self-service sign up. So that's well underway, really stringing together the ability for those clients to fill out your form as a part of signing up for the group, make those room selections, make any authorizations all in the same flow, and then actually be able to land on a completed itinerary. So that's going to be so much fun to demo. There's still much to do to make that possible by the webinar. And then even next week, we're pushing to also integrate option block selection into that, because if you have option blocks, which we've actually seen a fair amount of group itineraries that have option blocks on them, you'll want your clients to be able to make some of those selections as a part of signing up as well. So that's all slated for next week. And then in the new year, we know it's always funny. We always joke that when we release new things, people are so unbelievably excited and it's amazing. And then it's always, and these 10 other things we need. And we love it because we're like, okay, now we got to get to work again. And so we know that will be the case with groups as well. We have a bunch of things top of our hit list that we have planned, but we also, of course, stay really agile to feedback. So just some of the main things on our hit list, being able to configure in a more structured way what we're calling optional add-ons. So things like shore excursions or wine tours that you want your clients to be able to optionally kind of select during the onboarding and sign-up experience, and authorize if they add it. And kind of people are kind of using option blocks like this today, but not the best solution for this use case. We have a lot of improvements that we want to make around packages. Packages came up the most often, I think, maybe second to rooms in terms of when we talk to people about groups, like what would break and what wasn't working. And it's another one that'll be fun to fix because there's already so many issues with packages today, or things that we could do better, I would say.
Opportunities.
Yeah, opportunities for improvement. There's smaller things too, like the whole per room, per night, per person, or I'm butchering it, Brad can correct me, for cruises in particular, it continues to, we're seeing some people, Brad, do you want to share maybe what you saw some people doing on their itineraries?
Yeah, I think what folks are often doing, they're using option blocks, but they're not pricing it per room, which is what we're going to need them to do if they want to use this room selection thing, because they'll need a different price per room. But if you do per room, you get per night. So like, no, but I need flat rate. And they're doing that. Or they're just like putting in some random price, then in the description being like, but actually, here's the price of this thing. I swear, like all bold here, this is actually the price. We're like, okay, we can fix that.
Yeah, Brad and I were like, can we bribe an engineer to like work over the weekend and do it before the webinar? I don't think we're going to be able to slot it in before the webinar, but that's like very high on our list.
Yeah, and kind of grouped into that, I think, is the like occupancy rates per room. Like there's another pricing thing we'll have to think about there too. Yeah.
Yeah, and double occupancy comes up a lot. And then there's some things that we unfortunately had to cut that are high up there that we think will add a little extra like polish and stuff, like being able to have structured media for your rooms, photos associated with rooms. You can embed photos in the room descriptions, but it doesn't quite have the same wow factor that we want. So let me tell you, the list is long. The good news is that we have a lot of time carved out in Q1 of next year in particular for these roadmap items that are slated, and also just to listen and learn from our users related to groups. So we will be very much in that mode and are excited to do that. And I think the other just bigger feature that we know people are really looking for is trip funds. So I know, David, maybe you can share a little bit more about how we're thinking about that, but that's another thing very high on our radar that we've done a lot of diligence and research for in the past few months.
Yeah. And I think one thing, I was talking about trip funds, but one thing I'll just add that I think is cool, and again, it's sort of like what the belief has been all along, which is like groups, it's sort of like a pressure test for the rest of the product, right? Because we've like built this as like, there's many building blocks that kind of support groups then starts to pump volume through every other part of the product. And so we will talk a lot about like these improvements that we're making within the kind of groups umbrella, but those improvements will add value to an advisor if they've never planned a group trip, right? Like they'll have more flexibility in pricing and packaging and like at an FIT level, at just a cruise level, right? Like, so I think, it's helpful for people, like you'll hear us sort of group all that into groups, but like it's actually just improving the structures under the product, particularly around pricing and packaging. And then just maybe like briefly, this trip funds I do think is something I know a lot of people, you either don't care about it at all or it's like the thing for you, right? And we have spent a lot of time, and it turns out that from a kind of fund processing perspective, like travel is seen by a lot of these processors as high risk. There's a thread in the kind of Facebook group where somebody set up a Stripe account and Stripe shut down their account for service fees, and they had to talk to Stripe and they got it reopened. But like, that's a good example. But it turns out almost every processor has this kind of anxiety about travel. A lot of that came from the pandemic, when you had so many people charging back trips that never happened. And credit card companies basically weren't able to reclaim those funds from a travel company that went bankrupt. And so the next in line to cover those costs are the processors. So it's your Stripes of the world. It's whoever like actually helps facilitate that transaction. And so, we've spent a lot of time looking at how other platforms have handled this. Like we're not experts in other platforms, but like what we've seen is that there's a high risk ask for forgiveness way to do this that puts your risk as an advisor, like puts your money as an advisor, as an agency at risk. Because if that gets shut down, the processor will freeze those funds potentially indefinitely while they investigate, while they hold them for risk, which can bankrupt the agency and the advisor. And so just like we did for credit card authorization, like we're going to take our time here. We're going to find the right partners to help with this. We're going to do the diligence to make sure that they know we're doing with travel. We're going to start ramping this slowly, because if you have one bad advisor or agency that signs up and uses this early, it could have a cascade effect on everybody else. So we'll have a vetting process for people that are using this. Like we're trying to be very thoughtful. And you layer on top of that the concerns that agency owners have around like net rates and groups and markups. And like this is a very, very complicated product. And I think it's fair to say, like, unlike some of the other systems out there, we're not going to rush into it and throw something out to market that like we aren't comfortable putting our name on. And so expect us to have an answer for this slowly starting to ramp in Q1, but we will be optimizing for doing it right and protecting the partners that put their trust in us as much as we can, over just trying to check the box on having group funds and knowing that we're putting our partners at risk. So stay tuned on that. It's definitely top of mind, but it won't be, for the webinar. Certainly it's going to be a little bit of a, crawl before you run, before you walk type. No, before you, whatever the order is. Anyway, anything else on groups before we talk about kind of a week ahead, other things on our mind? We're going to start with you, Molly, on the week ahead, because we started with Brad on the week in review.
So my week ahead is webinar. Assuming I won't be back to work after the offsite and the holidays, because my due date is like around then. So like just a bunch of prep to make sure that those early January projects and projects while I'm gone in general, the team feels really good about. And testing all the things that we're trying to get done by the webinar. So it's going to be that last push. It's going to be an intense week, but it's going to be a really good one.
Be very intense. Yes. Brad, what is your very intense week going to look like?
I think copy and paste, but maybe axe the maternity leave prep stuff, and we got it.
Well, yeah, Brad doesn't know this yet, but
Yeah.
I was gonna say he's gonna help with the prep, but also he doesn't know this yet, but he's gonna have some offsite prep on Thursday, Friday that I need help with. So swap maternity leave prep with that.
Yeah, all right.
Breaking the news on podcast is cruel, I think.
I know. Well, I just remembered. I was like, I've been meaning to talk to you about that actually, but no time like the present. I mean, echo everything on the group's webinar. I think that's like, these webinars are just like massive pushes, as you can see. So like that's like making the slide deck, making sure the invitations are out, like tracking that, like figuring out the logistics of how do you have, 1,000+ people on a webinar at a time. Like it's just a lot that kind of goes into all that. But then also prepping for the offsite. This is, like I said, it's the kind of one time a year we bring everybody together. We invest a lot in this. And so we will have limited support coverage. And then because the Tern team and people have asked this so many times, like just Tern sleep, like, I would, we work really, really hard. And so we're actually giving everybody the whole week between kind of Christmas and New Year's off. We're kind of shutting down the office. Katie, Brian, and I will be kind of supports and kind of background. So you'll have some support, but it'll be a little bit slower. But one of the big things I'm thinking through, in addition to all that, is how do we continue to invest in resources to help scale support? We have increased the number of users on Tern by over 1,000% since this time last year. And our support team is still 2 people plus other people helping, right? And like, I'm really proud of the support that we deliver. I think it's something like literally we're just looking at our net promoter scores, which is a survey we do. And, so many people comment on how high quality our support is. But like Brooklyn and Ellen, like shout out to them. Like they are in the queue every day trying to answer questions. And we're trying to look at like, what are the things that we can do from a product perspective to reduce the support load? How do we help Finn, which is our AI assistant, like be smarter so that you can get better instant answers 24/7, even if the Tern team's at an offsite? So trying to spend some time investing in that. And then we will be doubling the size of the support team in Q1 of next year. So, kind of early insight in that, we will be adding kind of more headcount to that as well. And so you really continue to invest in not just building out this product, but also making sure that we're supporting the team. So that's exciting, but it means that there's a lot to do to get ready for that and kind of hopefully get Finn smarter by the time that the team is off. So we'll see. Busy week ahead for everybody. Well, that wraps up the podcast. Any closing thoughts, Brad, Molly?
Join the group.
I'm so hungry. I need to go eat. Thank you so much.
Okay, we got to get Brad some food. It's been a marathon of meetings. Thank you all for tuning in. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next week at the webinar. So thanks, everyone. Have a great time. Bye.